With Chelsea's dominance over the Women's Super League becoming more imposing season on season, we discussed whether the WSL is becoming a farmers' league. We start by looking at data from the last 10 years of the top 5 European women's football leagues. We also discuss Chelsea's January spending, and we look at why Chelsea will push other clubs to invest more. These are our thoughts on whether the WSL is becoming a farmers' league. Alright, let's get into it then. Today we're going to be talking about the WSL and whether or not it is becoming a farmers' league. It's a term that is thrown around a lot online, of course, and a lot of it is usually aimed at Liga F because of Barcelona's dominance, so we're going to be talking about that today. We're going to be talking, though, whether the WSL is becoming a farmers' league, comparing it to some of the other leagues, and discussing it like that. And let's start by defining what is a farmers' league then. Now, Harry, how would you describe a farmers' league?
I would put it as there is a massive dominance from one side, and for the majority of each season, they look pretty unbeatable.
Yeah, I think that is true. I'd say no competition for titles is a pretty good mark of one. Obviously, one team that wins a lot of trophies. So, with that said, let's look at some stats then. So on screen now is stats since the 2011-12 season. This shows the big 5 leagues in the women's game. We've got the ratio of titles won by the dominant team. We've got the number of different winners, the average points margin to second, because I think that's quite important in seeing how much dominance they have over their rivals, and then the average goal difference of the champion, which again shows how much dominance that team has over the league. Now, I will mitigate that last one by saying that obviously, Liga F play 30 games, the WSL only plays 22, so there is 8 more games in there. So I mean, it's difficult to adjust that with the nature of goal difference, but you can sort of make adjustment in your head, saying that if the WSL played another 8 games, it probably would be a little bit higher. But let's look at the ratio to start with the titles won by the dominant team. WSL 8 of the last 13 have been won by Chelsea, which is that in itself is quite dominant.
Yeah, very much so, especially when you consider that the majority of that has come more recently than the others. But yeah, it's ridiculous. It's and to think that when there is, when you talk about the big 4 and I think we say the big 4, the 2 Manchester clubs, Arsenal and Chelsea, to think that eight of those titles of the last 13 have gone to Chelsea, and then the other, well, I say the other 3 had to share them, but not even Man United have been the winners. Obviously, Liverpool have got one in there as well. So. Yeah. It's one of those where definitely, I think towards the start, the WSL, we saw the winners shared about. As you said, we saw Arsenal, we saw Liverpool, but now Man City
did get 4 different winners of the WSL, which is the second most of these big 5 leagues. Only the Serie A had 6. Wow. Serie A is brilliant. If you want to watch a league that's really close, 5 out of 13 have gone the way of Juventus, I think it is, that have got 5 there. 6 different winners, average points of 6 though, so there is a bit of a gap. When the teams do win the league, but there's so many different winners, you never know who's going to be that dominant force. So Serie A very tight. WSL 8 out of 13, as I mentioned, for Chelsea. However, Liga F 9 out of 13 have gone the way of Barcelona. You've got Premier League, 12 out of 13 have won by Olympique Lyonnais. The only other title in there going to Paris Saint-Germain. Definitely the least competitive in terms of different winners. Only 2 different winners in the time period we're talking about. 6.38 the average points margin to second. Only Liga F has a higher one. Liga F's average points margin is at 9.0. And I think that shows perhaps where the difference is in when we're talking about the Liga F and the WSL. Yes, Chelsea have only won 1 less title than Barcelona in that 13-year span. However, there is a different level of dominance, and the same with goal difference. Barcelona's up at Liga Ref's average goal difference of the champion at plus 95 compared to WSL's plus 38. Now, as I say, there is a difference in the number of games played there, but it's not a 60 goal difference in 8 games.
Yeah, it's one of those where, as you say, the titles on paper are very, very similar, but the difference is that Chelsea are having to work a little bit harder for them. There's been a lot of times where it's gone down to the final day where Chelsea have only won it with
last year. It was exactly level on points.
Yeah, incredible. And the year before that with Man United, it's one of those where Chelsea, they're being pushed right to the very end. For Barcelona, with the champion in the Liga F, but let's say Barcelona because they've won 9 of them. They've got with that average of a 9-point gap, they usually have 2, 3, or 4 games to spare in left at the end of the season when they become the champions. So it's a really nice position to be in, and obviously the fact that does happen means that gap probably that average is a little bit lower, because it means if they do win the league with 4 games to go, there's a bigger chance they're going to slip up in the last 4. and then that gap's going to close because they've already won the league. What's the point? But yeah, so Chelsea being worked, but I think that it does show that in terms of the actual success, the silverware, it is very similar.
Yeah, I would agree. However, I will say, I think from the stats seen, the WSL isn't a Farmers League yet. The question is, though, is it becoming one? Is Chelsea's dominance going to make it become one? So the next talking point, are Chelsea too rich for other teams to compete? The January transfer window, a huge talking point, breaking the world transfer record for Naomi Gurma, $1.1 million or around £890,000. Kira Walsh coming in as well, I think around £400,000. So about £1.3 million spent on transfers from Chelsea. Now, obviously, no other team in the league has come anywhere near that in this January transfer window. Man City had Caroline on a free transfer, but that was a huge wage. We're aware of that. Arsenal, only business was bringing in Jenna Niswanger and a loan deal for Chloe Kelly. Niswanger, I think, was 150k. Kelly, obviously, a loan deal with, they've got the option to get her for free in the summer. So not a huge outlay there. And that is the difference we're talking about. Yes, City brought in Knack in the end. They brought in Ayama. They brought in Laura Weinreuter on loan, and obviously Caroline, which is a productive window, but the spending was nowhere close to Chelsea's. Are Chelsea too rich for other teams to compete? Are Chelsea just gapping what is already quite a distance between them and the other clubs?
It's a really interesting one. Todd Bowley has shown a clear intent to invest and pump money into the women's side, and that is key for Chelsea because, as you say, and the reason I believe he's doing this is because he sees that Chelsea are already pretty dominant, so he understands from his position, if he puts more money into it, he can kind of lock down that dominant success for Chelsea and make them near on unstoppable. So he's seeing that as an opportunity that if he comes out and he is the first to smash the cash and use his riches, then there's a good chance that Chelsea can just run away with it. That being said, the likes of FSG and the City owners and Sir Jim Ratcliffe are hardly poor people.
No, Stankro won't get Arsenal.
That is a very good point. If anything, he's probably one of the most expensive out of all of them. So it's one of those where, in terms of the spending, Chelsea are using their riches, yes, and they look like that. They are spending a lot more money. But for me, it's not a case of that they have more money. It's just that Bowley is willing to give it to the women's side. Whereas when you take Sir Jim Ratcliffe, for example, he's trying to sack as many people as possible and take as much money away from everything.
The women's team are training out in a local field at this rate. But I think the problem is people always frame the debate around Chelsea being too rich or Chelsea spending too much money. But I don't think it is that, because as you say, every other club has the opportunity. I think it's just Chelsea are more ambitious. I think that's the thing. If a lot of clubs, a lot of fans want to deflect and say, "Oh, Chelsea are spending too much, that's why they're successful," rather than look at their own owners and say, "Why aren't we spending more?" Because every owner in the club could do it. I mean, Baroness Brady isn't going to food banks, is she? So every owner in the WSL could spend that money, has that money available. So I think that the argument that Chelsea are too rich is wrong. I'd say Chelsea are just more ambitious with it. It helps they've got Todd Bowley, who just seems to have a fetish for spending all of his money, but I think there is a clear drive, clear ambition there with the women's side that other WSL clubs don't seem to have. And I think from Chelsea's perspective, it's about building a side that is competitive in the Champions League and dominant in the WSL. Now look at the success of Barcelona, who, because they've won 9 titles out of the last 13, because they've claimed Champions League titles in the last few years, are selling out the Nou Camp.
Yeah.
And that is a huge difference between what we're seeing in the WSL, where Chelsea can barely sell out the bottom tier of Stamford Bridge. I mean, the Arsenal game was a good sellout, but what those figures don't show you is that a lot of the home end was Arsenal fans, and that contributed to what was a pretty poor atmosphere from the Chelsea fans, I thought. But yeah, I think that is the goal for Chelsea, is that by being this dominant force, they will be able to then attract a bigger audience, attract more fans, and so therefore becoming this force in the women's game. That will be the goal for Chelsea. Now, whether or not that comes to fruition remains to be seen, but you see the long-term objectives and the long-term plan there for the Blues. I think Bowley will see that the WSL has huge room for growth, and if they're on the sharp end of that, we've already seen a huge growth in the last 5 years, but I think in the next 10 it could go even bigger. And so I think they'll see that opportunity, and they want to be at the sharp end, the forefront of that change. So I can see why Chelsea want to invest that money. It's now on the other clubs in the league to follow suit. I think it follows quite nicely into our next question. Will this dominance hurt or help the league's growth? Because I think for Chelsea as a club, them being dominant, them going to compete in the Champions League is very good. But for the WSL, does it hinder or does it help? What do you think?
I think in terms of what it will bring to, as you say, the impact that it will bring to Chelsea will benefit the WSL, because it means that not only will there be more eyes on Chelsea, but there'll be more eyes on the league, because you think if Chelsea get more following because they're doing better, then suddenly you think every Chelsea game is going to be watched by more people, and that is going to benefit the league. I think that it will hurt. It could potentially hurt the It's one of those where it could increase the likes of viewership and the income, but it could also hurt the actual competition of the league, in terms of if Chelsea are winning every title, are people just going to start to get a little bit frustrated? But as you say, Chelsea, because they're looking to replicate what Lyon are experiencing right now, what Barcelona are experiencing right now, there is a good chance that potentially they do just build what is where you come into pre-season, you go, well, they're going to, unless there's some minor miracle, they're going to win the league. This year was the one, I feel, that people went, there's a chance that Chelsea won't, because Emma Hayes has gone, and then welcome Sonia Bonpastor, throw £1.3 million around in January, and suddenly the league looks set. And
it's fair, the league looked set before January.
It did.
They've just expanded that gap.
That's exactly what they're doing. And I think that the main reason, the other reason I think it will benefit the WSL is because I think it's going to force people to invest. Because if the likes of Arsenal and City and United don't start to put more money in, there are teams lower down the league and lower down the pyramid, not looking at Michelle Kang, but there are other teams coming up, other teams towards the bottom end who are now starting to put money in, which is going to put pressure onto those bigger sides. And as you say, with the exponential growth I think we could see over the next half a decade, then there's a good chance that in 5-10 years, the London City Lionesses could be right at the sharp end of the English football pyramid. And that's what teams have got to be careful. Durham have now been overtaken by some Euro Millions winners. They're going to be coming through. So I think what it's good, the likes of Chelsea and the other teams that are investing, it's good because I think at some point, whether it's next season, whether it's in 3 seasons' time, it is going to force those big, rich presences, it's going to force them to put money into the game. If not, their side are going to slip down and they're going to have a massive problem.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. I think it very much depends on the level of dominance as to whether this is a help or hindrance. I think if you look at the Liga F and the Division 1 Feminine, or now the Premier League, I think if you look at those divisions, it's borderline unwatchable because you already know the result of the season before it starts. And there's a reason we don't bother covering Liga F on here, and it's because it's pretty much a foregone conclusion. Barcelona, it's February, and Barcelona have had that league wrapped up since about December. And I know Chelsea have been dominant this season, so that's where my argument falls down a bit. But in previous seasons, it's not been like this. If this season keeps up for the next few years, it could be a hindrance. I still think the dominance this season isn't quite as ridiculous as like Barcelona's. I know Chelsea have won all but one game, but their games against Arsenal, Manchester City and United have felt close. And it does feel like those domestic cups and when when those big games come up again in the later parts of the season, they will be close ties.
Yeah.
So I can't see a way that they beat one of the teams in the final 5-0, like Barcelona beat Real Madrid. That's the big difference. I don't think there'll ever be that level of dominance because I don't think Arsenal, Man City and Man United would allow that gap to grow. And as you say, investment is going to come in at the bottom of the league. I think if London City Lionesses go up next season, they will splash the cash.
Yeah.
Because they've got the richest owner in the league.
Yeah.
And so I think there is a huge opportunity there. So I don't think we'll see the WSL reach the point where Chelsea are winning the league by 20 points or having a plus 154 goal difference like Barcelona did in the 2020-21 season, which is frankly absurd. How they managed that. One fantastic feat from them, but I don't think we'll ever get to that point in the WSL where there is such dominance by one team because there is investment across the pyramid, because the WPLL have taken over now and are intending to make this league the most watched women's football league in the world. So I think there is a huge amount of interest, and I can't really see Chelsea becoming this sole dominant force at the top of the table. So in that regard, I don't think WSL will become a Farmers League. This season, though, is a worrying one, I think, for a neutral perspective.
Yeah.
For the competition in the league, this season will be a concern.
Yeah, I think this, as you say, this season's the big one. But the reason I have a bit of faith is that if take the Premier League or the Liga F, right, I think towards the end of the season, towards the end of this season, Lyon and Barca will extend their gaps. The gaps at the top will get bigger and bigger. With the WSL, and I may be wrong, and Chelsea might end up, but for me, the fact that Chelsea have still got to play have still got to play United and Manchester City, and they've still got difficult trips to the likes of Liverpool and Brighton, and Aston Villa nearly took points off them a couple of weeks back. I don't see Chelsea's gap getting bigger than it is right now. I think, especially with the competitions that Chelsea are in, I feel that there is an opportunity that even if it only closes to 6 or maybe it will close to 4 or something like that, I just think that the gap will close. Teams will get closer. I don't see Chelsea winning this by 15, 18 points. I just think it's impossible, because I don't think there's a way that Chelsea. I mean, mentioning City there, Chelsea have got to play City 4 times in a row. There's no way Chelsea are going to win all 4 of those games. That would be the nail in the coffin for me. But I think that with all the competitions, there's no way Chelsea don't lose a game. I just don't think it's possible.
I think it's possible. It depends. I think the City game sandwiched in between 3 other Man City games, the WSL fixture, that may be one that they sacrifice, because I think there will be a rotated side there. So I wouldn't be surprised if that was a loss. But I think more broadly, Chelsea can win every game this season because other teams just haven't got it together correctly. I think Arsenal's season sacking a manager early on, and then obviously Slager's done very well, but they're not at that level yet to compete with Chelsea. So that was always difficult. City have completely fallen apart over winter without Hemp, Shaw, and Alex Greenwood. Manchester United, I still think, are a few signings away from being at that top level. They're really good defensively, but they do struggle to break teams down. And we saw in the Chelsea game, they really didn't come forwards apart from right towards the end where they needed a goal. So I think there is just a difference between those sides that are close to Chelsea. And then Chelsea themselves. I think Chelsea they have got that gap at the moment.
I just think that at some point this season, we'll see what we saw last season. The FA Cup semi-final between Man United and Chelsea was the greatest example. I think at some point, one team will get the rub of the green. Will get the rub of the green against Chelsea. May have to. United rode their luck in that game incredibly. Mary Ertz made loads of slows and saves. United scored 2 goals very, very early on. Zellum handballed it in the penalty area and wasn't given a penalty. I think there's a very good chance that will happen in some game this season. And even if Chelsea do get through, they beat Man City and they do play Barcelona. If they focus on that Barcelona game, there's a chance that the league games either side of that they could get punished in. But all it takes for me is a side to get a little bit fortunate, and then suddenly they could get that Villa game, for example. They deserved a point, and if they'd got the luck that day, then they would have taken a point from that game. But it was Chelsea who got a bit fortunate and ended up winning through an own goal. But that proved to me that there is a very Everton. They got a little bit lucky. They scored in the FA Cup. They scored an Olympico, and wow, it was a brilliant goal from Holmgard. But that put them right in the game.
Yeah.
And so I do think that if one side gets a little bit of luck, they will manage to take points off Chelsea.
Yeah, potentially. I think it will be difficult for Chelsea to win every competition. That is obviously their aim. I don't think they'll do it with ease. I think if they are going deep in the Champions League, they may well rest up in WSL games and drop points. So I agree with you in that regard. I'm just not sure if they'll lose. I think there will be a goal not to lose a game this season. Yeah. Because Chelsea want to get the best record possible, of course. Let's talk more broadly about the WSL, though. We're talking a lot about Chelsea, but more broadly, is there too much of a gap between what I would call the big 4 and the other 8? Because you've got obviously we've spoken a lot about Chelsea, Man United, City and Arsenal, that big 4 teams. And we saw last season Liverpool finish above Manchester United. We're seeing this season Brighton flirted with 3rd and 4th in the league, now have slipped to 5th. So is there an opportunity for those clubs, or are the top 4 now set?
I think it's one of those where, yes, there is a gap. There's no point trying to hide that. But as Brighton proved that it only if Brighton invest again in this coming summer window, they could prove that it will only take 2 seasons to get right at the sharp end. This season they've done well. I think the gap they've bridged this season from going from in that bottom 3 or 4 to getting right up to being the best of the rest is a huge jump they've made. And if they make
does that sheer drop off since the turn of the year, does that sheer drop off show that there is still a problem there?
Yeah, it does, but I think the main thing is that it shows that they're going to have to invest. I think they will, but I think what it's going to show is that, because I do believe that in a couple of seasons' time, Brighton will be able to go to Chelsea, go to Arsenal, and take points off them. because I see the vision at Brighton where if they invest over the next couple seasons, they will be. And this is why I said earlier about the other teams having to be careful, because if Brighton put money in over the next couple seasons and the likes of Man United and the likes of Arsenal don't invest that much, I can see Brighton catching up. And while there is a big gap, I think that in a couple seasons' time, if the likes of Brighton or, I mean, Aston Villa, if Arroyo keeps playing this superb football they're on at the moment, I mean, Tottenham did a bit and then they didn't do any.
Give Matt Baird any money,
yeah,
they might win the league.
Give him a fiver, and I think you might be able to get them somewhere. But yeah, I do believe that in the next couple of years, it's that consistent investment. Brighton have done really well. They've invested this going into this season, and they've been rewarded. They've climbed the league by 3 or 4 places. They may drop off, which I'll be surprised.
But that's the question, isn't it? Is it sustainable for Brighton? A lot of the signings they made, while very good recruitment, don't point towards that being a foolproof future plan. They're relying this season on Nikita Paris, who is over the crest of 30, I think, or just below. Frank Kirby, who is 33 now. So there is a reliance on some of those older players. And those two probably have been their best 2 players this season. So I think the question is this sustainable for Brighton? And obviously they have got younger players in there as well who've done very well. So there is that other side of the argument. But they are going to have to invest a lot more, I think, to get closer to those top sides.
Yeah.
Because while the investment from teams like United hasn't been incredible, they have still brought in some very talented footballers. So it's going to be really interesting. I think there is an opportunity for those sides to break into the top 4. I don't think that top 4 set. I think especially with London City Lionesses, hopefully coming up into the WSL next season, there's going to be a huge flush of investment there.
Yeah.
And I think that then, if they can come into the league and stay in the league, that will then prove to the WPLL that they can extend the league.
Yeah.
Because I think we can easily get another 4 teams in, and then have 16 teams like the Liga F does. And then we'll get a fair comparison of that equal number of games, and we'll get an idea of how dominant Chelsea are. Because you'd bring in 4 teams who, in theory, are lower quality. Now, obviously, if they come in and invest well, we may see them push up the league. But yeah, I think the WSL is in a place where more teams, more competition will be helpful.
Yeah.
I think at the moment there is... The field is spread quite thin, because from bottom to 5th, there's not a huge gap there at the moment. And so I think that is a bit of a problem, because they just keep taking points off each other, and it makes it easier for the top 4 then to break away.
Yeah, and I think that especially when if you look at the teams who, if we extend the league, you look at the teams who would potentially come in. As you mentioned there, the London City Lionesses, who have got all the money on the earth with Michelle Kang. Yeah. You've got Birmingham, who are right up the sharp end with brilliant money. Durham have just had a new board of directors come in with quite a bit of money, and it proves.
I think it's Newcastle up there as well, who are backed by the oil money of Saudi Arabia. So you've got 4 clubs there who would come in with huge investment. So I think there is an opportunity that the league will be expanded. I think the problem that is limiting the league at the moment is TV rights deals, because I think the broadcast deal is signed to 2030, which means they can't. It would be difficult. The legislative process of extending the league would be difficult while that deal is signed. So it's going to be interesting to see how they handle that. But I think there will be intention for the WPLL to expand the leagues. I mean, they're talking about B teams. I think the reason they're doing that is if they were to bring in B teams lower in the pyramid, they could then sort of expand the leagues, and that wouldn't leave gaps in the pyramid. I don't think it's the best solution, but I understand the thinking there. Yeah. And that's a topic for another video. But in terms of this being a Farmers League, what is your verdict? Is the Women's Super League currently a Farmers League? Will it become a Farmers League?
For me, it's not there yet. It's very much not there. With the title fight's been extremely close over the last year, and again, as I said, a couple results here and there were different, and we could have seen Man United and Man City be our last 2 winners of the WSL. So it's one of those where I definitely don't think we're there yet. I think there is a slight concern that if this carries on, that Chelsea will just start to reign supreme. But as I said, if the likes of Stan Kroenke decides to get his wallet out, then that gap will bridge. Arsenal threw 1.1 million at Kira Walsh. That proved that they do have the same kind of figures. They're throwing around the same kind of money as Chelsea.
It's there. It's whether they're going to spend it.
If they use it, then the gap closes up again, and suddenly we're back. We have a really, really competitive league, and they could be right on Chelsea. And I think they will look to, other teams will look to do that. So I think we look to be safe.
Yeah, and obviously Arsenal have that huge fan base now. They have that huge support, so that revenue is a bit higher. Yeah. So there is more money there available. In fact, I think they rival, but they're only 100,000, I think, off Barcelona's takings from last season. So there is a huge fan base there for Arsenal, which is very helpful. I think Chelsea will look to amass that over the next few years. I think the big thing for me is when you're talking about one dominant team, is do any other players in the league get in that team? And I think there are players that get in. Yui Hasegawa definitely gets in that team for me. I think Maya Letizia would be a very strong shout, close with Millie Bright there. I think Emily Fox over Lucy Bronze, a fairly close shout. I think you look over at the Barcelona team and you don't put a single other player in that league in there. Like even Real Madrid players don't touch that Barcelona team, and the same applies really for Lyon and PSG because they just buy all the PSG players. So yes, Katoto's going to get in the team because they're buying her. So they're, I think Chelsea aren't going to go and sign Yu Hasegawa, and there is a difference there. So I think we're safe for now, and I think we will be safe. I can't see a world in which the WSL becomes a farmers' league, as much as Barcelona fans may want to perpetuate that in the comment section. I'm sure they will, that the WSL is a farmers' league and no one can beat Chelsea, but I think it's a very, very good season from Chelsea. I can't see that being 100% sustainable. I think other teams in the league won't allow that. They will invest more. So I don't think we are a farmers' league, and I don't think we're on track for one.
Yeah, and if you are getting bored of the WSL and you want to watch a really competitive league, either watch the Serie A Femminile, because you never know who's going to win it, or the Frauen Bundesliga, which has been a superb fight.
It's weird, isn't it? Because in years gone by, that's been one of the more definitive leagues. Wolfsburg have won 7 of the last 13 titles. I think 4 of them have been won by Bayern, and then 1 or 2 for Frankfurt in there as well. So there's not been a whole load of competition. In fact, it might have been Turbine Potsdam who won the 2012 edition. So there's not been loads of variance in winners in the last few years, but this season, 4-way fight for the title. I think we may have to do a video on that soon as well.
Potentially.
Very exciting title fight out there. And that does round up today's video, though. I'm sure there'll be a lot of conversation going in the comments down below, so get involved, and we'll make sure to get involved we'll reply to all of your comments, so get involved in the comments section. If you're new to the channel, make sure to hit that subscribe button. It massively helps us out. That, though, is everything from us today. Thank you guys very, very much for watching, and we'll see you next time.
See ya.